Chai with Manjula, a show about giving, featuring non-profit organizations, social activists, social entrepreneurs, and philanthropists who are giving back and making a difference. Chai with Manjula is a show that is a must-see. Today, a historic Smithsonian initiative to tell the story of immigrants from India and their descendants in America. Welcome to Chai with Manjula. There are nearly 3 million people of Indian origin in the U.S. today. Indian communities and centers are becoming more robust and noticeable. And to chronicle their history, contributions, and challenges, and to mark their place within the nation, the world's largest museum and research center, the Smithsonian Institution, has launched a new project called Homespun, the Indian American Heritage Project. And to tell us all about it, Dr. Pawan Dhingra is here from Washington, D.C. He is leading the project as a curator. Pawan, welcome to Chai with Manjula.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, this is really exciting. You know, Smithsonian is the largest, the most prestigious venue for any exhibit. So it's a matter of great honor and pride for the Indian community. And you are leading the project. So tell us about it. How did a project about Indian American heritage get picked up by Smithsonian?
First, let me say thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor for us. And it got picked up because we're in the Asian Pacific American program at the Smithsonian. So quickly, when you visit the Smithsonian, you go to the National Museum of American History or the Air and Space Museum. But within the Smithsonian, there are other programs and centers and initiatives that help kind of shape the content that you see at the museums. One of those is the Asian Pacific American program, and its goals is to help diffuse and spread the conversations of Asian Americans throughout the Smithsonian. They've done projects on other ethnic groups, whether it be Chinese or Vietnamese or Korean or Japanese, Filipinos, but nothing on Indians or any other South Asian group in the U.S. So they realized this was a gap, and they wanted to fill. And local people from the Indian American community in D.C. also realized there's something that should be going on. So it's a nice confluence of people coming together to say we should do something to represent the Indian American community.
Okay, and what do they hope to accomplish through this?
Yeah.
What is the objective?
The overall objective is to help affirm our presence as part of the broader American story in a way that only the Smithsonian can do. Right? As you referenced, it's, one of the most esteemed cultural institutions in the world. It's like, in fact, the largest one in the world, and most esteemed, one of the most esteemed in the country. So we hope to kind of share knowledge, break down some misconceptions, and help people. That's
important. Yeah, there are lots of myths going around.
A lot of misconceptions. Yeah. And so either there's a lack of knowledge, or narrow notions of knowledge, or just misinformation. And so we need to kind of break that down and tell not only the broader public, but even ourselves don't really understand our history as well as we could.
That's true. That's very
true. That's something
true.
we can really have a dramatic impact on.
Okay, so how do you plan to portray our history, our struggle, our challenges? What kind of exhibits or programs are you going to have?
I hope you have a lot of time here.
Oh yeah,
I can go on for
take
quite
all
a while.
your time.
No, but seriously, there's going to be 4 major dimensions to the Homespun initiative. One is an exhibition, which I'll elaborate on. Others are public programs, and then a middle school curriculum, and then an interactive website. And I'll elaborate on each of those. It's going to be quite a bit, as well as a collection, but that's more behind the scenes. So in terms of the exhibition, which is our main kind of deliverable, that will go up at the Smithsonian starting April 2013. And it will be there for about 6 months, then travel the country for a number of years, including, of course, coming here. So the exhibition will reveal our history as well as contemporary lives, trying to show how we as a community have embraced opportunities to better ourselves, while at the same time trying to increase equal opportunities for ourselves and others. Constantly this conversation of taking advantage of what we have here and giving back and creating more for ourselves and others at the same time. And we'll see this along multiple dimensions. So one of the dimensions is obviously historical. So our history dates back, over 100 years. We'll probably concentrate starting about 100 years ago, especially in California and Pacific Northwest, early 1900s. And, you know, I can go on forever, but you know about that history to some degree, I'm sure.
Right,
The
right.
Punjabis coming in.
Yeah, especially in California.
California, Yuba City, Imperial Valley. Their efforts to free India with the Ghadar Party, Ghadar movement.
That's true.
Their relationships with Mexican Americans and their children and their grandchildren. The achievements of Dalip Singh Sond, right, our first
Right.
congressman, our only
In the
congressman
50s,
in the
right?
1950s. And there's also going to be references to Bhagat Singh Thind, who was a Supreme Court case, U.S. versus Bhagat Singh Thind, or vice versa, where he was petitioning for citizenship, but it was denied. It was a Supreme Court case.
Oh,
he
and when was that?
1923.
Okay.
So I'm working with his son to represent his father's life in that important time. And in fact, he was a World War I veteran.
Okay.
And all these things. So the historical moments we don't really appreciate deeply enough, not only on the West Coast, but also on New York City, New Orleans, Detroit. We had communities all over the country
Okay.
100 years ago. So we're going to represent that dimension, then move up to the next section we'll do the major industries and fields in which we as a community have had a presence. This goes back historically. Agriculture is one of them, thinking of California.
Right.
But other things are more typically associated with India, whether it be medicine, IT, obviously relevant here, literature, journalism, something about taxi driving, small business and motel ownership. One thing we don't appreciate is that many of us know that Indians own so many motels.
Right.
We own half the motels in the country. But they started here in San Francisco in the 1940s.
Okay.
And so working with local people, we hopefully will be able to help have some of the first hotel sign from our community in the exhibition. We hopefully will have one of the trunks that one of these Punjabi men came with in 1910s.
Oh.
Like his luggage, right? His trunk.
Okay, okay.
The size of this table or bigger could be in the exhibition. We're working on that. Those kind of things. We get a really visceral sense of what this history was like, what this community has been like. So other fields I mentioned, politics is relevant for other fields we've been in.
You have material.
We have materials
from the early 1900s.
Exactly. We have materials from then. We have photographs. We can get hopefully some more documents. This trunk that I mentioned, other memorabilia we can get our hands on. We're doing oral histories and video histories with some of the descendants of these pioneering immigrants.
Okay.
I'll be interviewing people myself. We're getting a large amount of research and resources from this early time as well as contemporary time.
I see.
So the exhibition will talk about the historical moments, talk about the current fields in which we have a presence. And the goal there is not simply to say, look how many the great things Indians have done. That's we'll definitely give respect when it's fully due, and it's definitely fully due. We also need to appreciate some of the challenges that each sector of our community still may go through as they're kind of progressing up. So just an example. We're well known as physicians in this country. Many physicians work in rural areas or under-resourced hospitals in inner cities or the like. That's part of our story too.
Right.
And it should be understood in conjunction with the kind of general appreciation of our contributions to medicine.
I see.
We are making great inroads in terms of workers' rights. With the taxi drivers unions of New York City is a major part of that city's Indian community.
Even in San Jose.
Even in San Jose.
When you
right?
come to the airport, most of the taxi drivers are
There
from
you go.
India.
And so the organizing they're doing and the efforts they're doing to protect their drivers' rights, that's part of a workers' rights issue, right? It's beyond just one group or one niche. And that's something we want to convey in this exhibition, that the lives of Indians in this country have shaped this nation beyond just ourselves.
Oh, okay.
Right? And that's one of the key things, right? So historically, you could talk about how we've diversified agriculture, diversified Congress. We could talk about how we've impacted the IT industry and changed the way all of us negotiate technology.
Right.
Same thing with medicine and everything else. And that carries over to the next side of the exhibition, which is going to be on culture and the ways in which much of Indian culture has become mainstream culture, right? Yoga. Something we take for granted, right?
Yeah, yoga is
every
great.
gym has a yoga class, right?
Right.
Bollywood, which is beyond just interest among our community. It pertains to many persons. Clothing, food. These are kind of things we take for granted. It's just part of American culture.
Right,
but it's part of Indian culture, Indian American culture.
40 years ago, when I came to this country, we were in Madison, Wisconsin, and there was no Indian store, no Indian restaurant, nothing.
And now Madison has a quite vibrant community. And it's one of the, like my cousin lives there, and I have a chance to visit it every so often, and it's pretty vibrant.
yeah.
So there's that kind of story as well. Also the spaces in which we practice our culture, whether it can be the local grocery store, right? That we take, it's actually something we've kind of drawn to, or the ethnic media, right? Or spiritual spaces, right? Where places where we come to congregate and find our culture, as well as some of the challenges we still may face as we try to express our culture. It's not a given.
What are some of the challenges?
So think about 9/11, and we're on our 10th anniversary, right? It was not easy for all of us after 9/11. Some of us felt, whether for due reason or not, concerned about how we'd be perceived. And there were clearly episodes of surveillance or hate crimes and the such.
Right, right.
That's a time when, while Indian culture may be appreciated, we have to be conscious that there are these moments, hopefully very few, that do arise, that make us realize we need to always be assertive of how much we belong in this country, how much our history, how much we're implanted here. You can't take it for granted. So we want to represent that dimension of our experience too.
I see.
The last section of the exhibition will talk about the younger generation and the ways in which the younger generation is expressing itself as part of this country.
Which is?
Oh, there's too many ways to count, but the ways we're focusing on, at least for now, one is kind of the rise of Indian American spelling bee winners, right? So I'm sure you know, it's a very fascinating story, a cute story.
Year after year.
Year after year. Even this past year was another example. I think they say 9 out of the past 13 years, Indians have won the National Script Spelling Bee. It's a phenomenal thing. And then there's even an Indian American, there's multiple Indian American only spelling bee or other bee competitions.
Okay.
That's deeply part of our community. It's a cute but also a revealing way to think about how the youth are really representing the nation overall. We think about what defines a country, right? The language is one of those key dimensions.
Right.
And the spelling bee in some way is showing a mastery of language. Who's mastering our language? Who's representing the nation? In many ways, it's people of our own community. On the other side of that is youth or younger generation involved in spoken word performance or hip-hop performance or poetry, performance poetry and the like.
Okay.
Ways of also using language as like spelling bees, with a very different kind of goal sometimes. Using that to raise questions or bring up issues that aren't always discussed.
Right, social issues.
Social issues, community issues. So that's again a way of how the youth and the younger generation is trying to find its way in this country and thinking about how we're doing so through this kind of creative and linguistic techniques. And there are other parts of the exhibition I haven't even touched upon, for instance, sports.
Okay.
Will be referenced there as well. These other things that will be referenced as well.
Okay.
But it'll be very diverse while still hopefully conveying a singular narrative and theme. So that's the exhibition. We'll also have public programs as part of this enterprise. That means we'll have dance performances or film screenings or readings or lectures, debates, whatever they might be, that kind of express different parts of our community. Those can be at the Smithsonian, but also those will travel. As the exhibition travels the country, those public programs will also take place in local areas in conjunction with the local scene. What's going on here versus what's
how
going
many
on.
cities will it travel to?
We hope to go to about 12 to 15 different cities.
Okay.
And those cities, we have ideas of what those will be, and some of those are the obvious ones, for instance, here, Los Angeles, Houston, New York City, Chicago, I can go on and on. But nothing's been decided in that area, but we have a sense of what those will be. And some that are less obvious, too. To kind of definitely bring the exhibition out. Because our community is very geographically spread out. We have certain pockets, but it's all over the country we're represented. So you could be almost anywhere.
Right. So in terms of contribution, will you also be highlighting their philanthropic contribution? Because there are so many well-known Indian philanthropists right now. I mean, Vinod Khosla is one. I know he's supporting your project probably. He recently pledged to give half of his, vast fortune of $1.5 billion to charity.
Right.
And there are so many other philanthropists here in the Bay Area. And if you go to Chai with Manjula, you'll meet some of them.
I have.
And
it's
in
a
fact,
to
a large extent, the objective of my show was also to, in a small way, chronicle this legacy of our community.
That's definitely something we want to bring into the conversation as well. I'm glad you brought it up. Philanthropy represents something of our community that really speaks to the core goals of the exhibition. If we want to show how our community is helping contribute and shape the nation, well, then philanthropy is a key dimension of this, right? So as we talk about the major industries in which we're involved, we can also talk about the ways in which many of our persons, whether they be the stature of Vinod Khosla or everyone else, who's really giving back.
They are giving back here in the U.S.
Right?
and in India in so many different ways.
Exactly. There are organizations that are set up to help contributors. People doing it on their own. And that's something we need to show. It's not, again, about just look what we've accomplished. Look what we've done.
I'll be happy to help you out with that.
I appreciate that. But also showing how we are helping, create opportunities for others as well, as I was getting at. So philanthropy is part of that conversation.
Wonderful.
Directly.
Good to hear that. And I also read that in school curriculum also you'll have some courses being offered. Or
we're going to create a middle school, primarily middle school curriculum, and be adapted to other grades as well, to talk about the Indian American history and experience that can be brought into an everyday school curriculum. So this is actually something very substantial. I grew up in the States. I understand what it's like to grow up here and go to school in the textbooks and everything else in the everyday curriculum. And there's very little reference to India in the standard curriculum. There's no reference to Indians in the U.S. It's not a population that's conceived as being part of a conversation about American history or economics or whatever it might be. By creating this curriculum and making it accessible to teachers, we can change that.
Yeah, and sometimes even the references which are there are probably misleading.
Exactly.
Or they are myths.
They're myths, right.
Not really facts.
And so one example of this is there's evidence to suggest that Indians were involved in the U.S. Civil War. Okay. Now imagine learning about the U.S. Civil War, which every student does, and hearing that fact. What impact it would have on our appreciation of what it means to be an immigrant community and what it means, what our role or other groups' roles in this nation are. So the middle school curriculum has to be a very substantial concern for us, a very important issue that can really impact the youth.
So you have experts in each area working with you, developing all these programs for you?
Yeah, we have a team of volunteer experts who offer their guidance on key dimensions, whether it be historical, whether it be literary, whether it be other components, IT, science and technology, those kinds of things.
I see.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is huge. As I mentioned earlier, very exciting for the Indian community. But I would like you to tell us, what does it mean to be included in the Smithsonian? What is the significance?
Right. Excellent question. The exhibition, and everything I've said about the exhibition is, it's all tentative. We don't know exactly we don't know exactly what will be in the exhibition until it's done. These are all our intents. The exhibition, by being part of the Smithsonian, will really help make our story part of the American story. The Smithsonian is the most trusted national cultural institution. It takes an act of Congress to create a Smithsonian museum, right? And so if the Smithsonian becomes the nation's museum, the nation's arbiter of its relevance, what's relevant to it, and helps decide what kind of stories the nation should be understood as, if we're not part of the Smithsonian, it raises the question, are we really part of the nation? And to date, we're not fully there. This can change that, and we're doing a permanent collection as well. I'm working with the Leap Sing Song's grandson. I'm working with Vinod Dham. I'm working with others to help create this.
Okay, so there's a great symbolic significance here.
Yeah, and that cannot be stressed too much. We have professional goals as a community. We have political goals as a community, but if we have the cultural mainstream, as the Smithsonian represents, on our side, it makes our other ambitions easier. It makes it easier for us to, run for office.
This means you have arrived.
It means you have arrived. It helps explain who we are in a way that makes our, other goals easier to accomplish. So you can think of it as the node from which other spokes revolve around. We can accomplish that.
And they have 19 museums in the country, I believe.
19 museum complexes as part of the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian, most of the Smithsonian sits on what they call the National Mall, which is a grass area, a large, very large grass area between the Washington Monument and Congress. And on each side of the grass area are the Smithsonian museums and everything else. And so it's a hugely trafficked area. It's a major symbolic value for the country. And every group, every exhibition wants to be on the National Mall. And in 2013, we will be.
So how large will the display be? Will it be a wall, a room, a hall, a building?
Yeah.
What is it going to be?
It's going to be, specifically speaking, it's going to be in the Ripley Center, which is right next to the Smithsonian Castle, which is a major piece of the Smithsonian kind of architecture.
Okay.
And it's going to be a 7,000 square foot gallery, which is very large.
Yeah, it is.
So we have ample space to tell the story we want to tell.
Okay.
And it's a very nice opportunity.
And where do you stand in terms of preparation? What all have you collected so far? What kind of help have you already received?
Right.
What kind of funds have you raised? Tell us which people are already helping you.
Well, in terms of the collections we've received, we're starting that process and it's going very well. As I mentioned, we're working with Dalip Singh Song, our first Indian American congressman from the 1950s. It's a phenomenal story. His grandson is working with us, and he's already donated campaign items from his grandfather. Let me just say one thing about that, why it's so important. Let's say someone wants to do a representation of California political history. Until we have these pieces, which we now do, and now other museums or libraries, universities can borrow them from the Smithsonian. If we didn't have those things, our history as part of that California political history wouldn't be included. But now it can be.
Okay.
So it has a large impact. So in terms of collection, we're working in terms of collection, in terms of other, where we're at other spaces. The fundraising is a key goal for us. We have a fundraising goal of $2 million. And the money must come from our community. The assumption would be to come from the Smithsonian itself.
Right.
The Smithsonian budget is already stretched.
So the community funds.
The community funds it almost fully. And with this $2 million, the first $1 million will go for the things I've already described, the exhibition, the public programs, the curriculum, and the interactive website. The second $1 million is going to go for an endowment, create a permanent presence for our community to be represented. So far, we've collected about a quarter of our fundraising goals, so about 3/4 of the way to go. We can do it, but if every Indian just gave $1, we would exceed our needs by far.
Right.
And people can go to our website, which is www.homespun.si.edu. And they can find more information and even give then. Homespun.si.edu. Edu.
That's the website.
Yep.
And tell our viewers, if they're listening, they're Indians, so many Indians around here, what kind of memorabilia should they start collecting and sending to you?
Great question. We would love to learn more about people's stories. The goal of the museum is to tell stories. So if people can help us tell our story through their story, then it's a wonderful opportunity.
And it's stories from the 70s, 60s, 90s. How far?
It goes as recent or as far back as we can go. There's no deadline. There's no cutoff to say this matters, it doesn't matter, right? What object do you ask yourself this question? If there was one thing in your home you think should be in an exhibition, what would it be? Would it be an object? Would it be a story you love to hear? Would it be a recipe? What would it be? And think
give
about
us a
that.
few examples so people get going.
Okay,
right
so
back.
if there's something that your family or someone who had a meaningful impact in your local area, then and something that represents that. So, for instance, I opened the first Indian restaurant in California, hypothetically, right? And then something from that restaurant. That's great to know. But even things like oral histories, old passports, visas, oral histories, home movies. Right? We all have home movies that we think are kind of silly. Actually, imagine we can collect those, we can archive those at the National Museum of American History, and that becomes part of our legacy, part of our American story.
That reminds me, in '71 in Madison, Wisconsin, we used to have India Night. I have pictures of that. I would play sitar there.
See?
And Diwali function,
right.
Even though there was hardly anything Indian around us in terms of stores and all that.
That helps really understand what was it like for a new immigrant community.
And there was an opening of Indian paintings in an art center there, and the Indian ambassador came in '71, and I played the sitar there.
Really?
I have those pictures.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Right? That helps us understand a moment in our history, community's history, that we don't know much about, and people would not believe, oh my goodness, there was enough of us in Madison to warrant the ambassador coming to have this thing, and you were playing the sitar there.
Yeah.
I mean, that really represents how in a space that, especially back in the 70s, was not known for Indians, as you already mentioned, we were making these small inroads here and there, changing America, diversifying the country, one city at a time.
Okay.
One sitar chord at a time.
So in terms of help, that's what you need. Funding, of course. How can people help you with funding? I mean, what kind of contributions are you looking for? Will there be fundraisers, or people can just send, $1, $5 on a website somewhere?
They can do all of that. So on the website, the most direct way is visit the website, homespun.si.edu, and there you'll find a link to donate. And you can pick a level. There's various levels there to pick. And depending on your interest and how much you're able to give, there's different ways you can be recognized for the donation, and it's all spelled out.
Are there any incentives for large donations?
There are. You can be recognized in multiple ways. It's laid out there, and depending on the level. But yes, large donations are very much appreciated, of course. But so people can, but as little as, $10. I mean, we like more, but $10 is $10. More important than the actual amount of money, it shows that we as a community are invested in this. We care about this. That's really the thing we want. We want this to be a grassroots effort that really the community responds to and feels inspired by, and then teaches us. We want to learn, and the community has the knowledge.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I'm so glad you came by here to tell us about it. And this is telling people about Indian history, cultural struggles, like you said, and dispelling myths and empowering our community. So,
very much so. And helping us understand our country. Right? And our country's relationship to India. All of these things become kind of...
it's good for the community at large, and for our generations to come, this is something that they look back at and take pride in.
Right. You think of it as leaving a legacy.
Yeah, this is a legacy.
For the next generation. You're creating a living monument that's very unique.
And it's great for you. What a wonderful job you have.
It's been a wonderful experience. Every day I learn something new, and it's been inspiring.
Okay, and real quick, tell us, what were you doing before you joined the Smithsonian?
Well, typically I'm a professor at a place called Oberlin College in Ohio, professor of sociology there. I've been there for a number of years, and so I've been taking a 2-year leave from my responsibilities there, my wonderful job there, to be heading this initiative at the Smithsonian in the APA program. And after this is finished, and go back to my life as a professor.
Okay, great. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for coming by, and we look forward to seeing this exhibition in the Bay Area.
Yes.
Soon.
One day.
That was Dr. Pawan Dhingra, who is leading a Smithsonian initiative called Homespun, the Indian American Heritage Project. It will serve as a monument to our experiences and forever tell our story in our own words at the world's largest museum complex, a story that will inspire our future generations and help them and other communities appreciate our journey, struggles, and contributions as immigrants to the U.S. This is history in the making, and an excellent opportunity for the Indian American community to get involved and be a part of an important legacy. For more information, go to homespun.si.edu. And to watch this show again, go to chaivithmanjula.org or YouTube. Thank you all for joining us. I'll be back with another inspiring story about giving and people making a difference. For Chai with Manjula, I'm Manjula Gupta. See you next time.